Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Siddhiporn. So today we will talk about transformation program about IBP transformation. So today is our first episode to discuss about this. We have two guests from Australia and Singapore. Hi, Tim.
Hey, Siddhiporn, good to see you.
Okay. Hi, Andrew from Singapore.
Hi, consider porn.
Right. So you can imagine in around the globe, we talk about digital transformation and industry 4.0. Right now, I think many organization they think about this, try to apply on this. Also, I think they attend seminar a lot. So think most of them try to utilize for this technology and integration in their organization. Tim, what do you think IBP or end-to-end, why we need this for organization? Can you describe for this?
Yeah, thanks, Siddhiporn. We find, I think the last year and a half has been very obvious to everybody in manufacturing and supply that you cannot rely on what has happened in the past to predict what will happen in the future.
Right.
And what IBP and digital transformation is helping us with is getting better foresight, establishing a picture of what may happen in the future, and allowing us to marshal our resources and the attention of our organization around that. It's not about having perfect foresight, but it's
Right.
about making sure that we pick a trend and we can prepare for it and prepare for contingencies. And that has never been more important and more obvious, I think, to everyone in the organization than now.
Okay, go on, Tim.
When one of the things that we're finding that is most relevant and is obvious for organizations that are starting their transformation journey is to improve their forecasting. And while getting good forecasting is not necessary to marshal the organization, you can do amazing things, whether your forecast is good or bad, whether the future is certain or uncertain, by having our best estimate, by having everyone in the organization who needs to access to their forecast, to have them help collaborate and build up a picture of where we think the trends might go, or what we think our supply and demand might happen, and allowing our organizations to collaborate in how we're preparing for that it makes our organizations much more nimble. It's like if we get everybody looking out the front windscreen, not just looking in the rear vision mirror, or everyone scattered everywhere. If everyone in the organization is saying we think that supply is going to continue to be hard to get containers for the next 6 months, and demand for packaged food is going to continue to be high for the next 12 months. Whatever demand we think, if we're all pulling in the same direction, our organization can be very nimble and take those opportunities aggressively and capably. And it's not about being right in the forecast, but having a forecast system and process that everyone in the organization can rely upon, get the information they need out of, is transformation. That is one of the first big steps that we see as being really enabling. If you don't, and the flip side is organizations that don't go into this IBP style approach and don't have a single set of numbers that everyone is working towards, it becomes very hard for the organization to move. If you have engineering are working on last year's maintenance schedule to repeat, and supplier working and they're ordering from history, and not taking into account that containers are very, very hard to get, and freight forwarders are struggling to book stillages and so on. And if our salespeople are still working and being promoted to sales that happened last year, they will miss the opportunities that present themselves in the marketplace with this changing environment that we're in. So we're seeing a lot of businesses are really challenging the way that they used to forecast, and they're starting or restarting their journeys on IBP by embracing that part of the journey, and that enables all the other supply pieces.
Right. May I ask some simple question? Most of an organization they already have enterprise resource planning. For ERP, that good enough for organization to make its collaboration, integration in terms of supply chain.
It's a great observation, and yeah, it's a great observation that many businesses do already have an ERP. It's very rare to see somebody going to or an organization going to SOP or IBP without having an enterprise resource system. But we have a saying that they're necessary for your business, but they're not sufficient for planning. And fundamentally, the reason that they're not sufficient is the ERP systems are designed from the ground up to tell you when the order was received, when the order was placed, when the product was made, when the product left the warehouse, and when the invoice was paid. And the interesting thing about all of these kind of transactions that your ERP system manages very, very well are they're all things that have already happened. When we're in planning and we're looking forward, that's like working in the rear vision mirror. I might share a screen while I talk to this, if you don't mind. I have a screen coming up here that the rear vision mirror is like your ERP system, and so it tells you very clearly what's happened in the past. But where we want when we're planning, when we're in an IBP world or even a planning 4.0 world, we are looking forward. We're traveling at high speed, and we want to see the opportunities and the problems as they're approaching. You can't do that looking backwards, and the ERP systems give you a great foundation for data and information, getting used to these, but they're foundational. They are not very good at telling you what will happen in the future. And so systems that are designed to allow you to see what happens if the foreign exchange changes, what happens if my supply out of India is slow or held up, what happens if I miss the shipment and I have to fly my product to my customer, or what happens if my machine breaks down and runs at a different rate, or we make improvements. These kind of uncertain probabilities that happen in real life, we have to cater for those when we're planning, and that's where the ERP systems are not designed for that uncertainty. They're designed for things that have already happened. And so for us, you need that. You need the discipline of being able to run an ERP system, but you want systems that are more flexible and more capable to deal with the unknown and help you navigate the unknown.
Okay. May I ask question? Is Andrew is your workplace consulting around the group in Asia? Most of organizations they efficient when they have ERP in their organization already in supply chain perspective. They do is more efficient in terms of sales and operation planning or not?
So I think it's an interesting area to try and you've got to take a step back when you think about the ERP and then how that connects to the rest of your business. Because as Tim alluded to, it isn't something that you can do away with. It's something that's absolutely necessary. It builds up a foundation of where your transactions go, how you operate, etc. From a consulting point of view, the difficulty really starts to come because it's a very different way of operating. A lot of planning has always been seen as the dark arts. It's always something that you do kind of with a little bit of hocus pocus and a little bit of magic. And it is, but it is not. It's actually got a lot of science to it. There's a lot of people for a long time have understood that the better you do this, the better operationally you will be, the better you can serve your customers. But you've only got to look at the fact that large ERP companies around the world have built planning systems. So, for a very long time, these guys have recognized that the core of the box of what is ERP needs to be extended if operationally, because businesses demand it. So what we see is they demand the ability to do more. So they're not just happy doing AP, AR, looking at their inventory, doing goods receipts, doing goods issues. They want to go deeper and they want to be better. And I think that's very indicative of what we see world-class companies moving towards, and what we also see is the rise of the SME as well. So, you're seeing not just the big companies these days who are striving for these ways of working. It's the SMEs, and particularly in this part of the world where the rise of the SME is key. There's a lot of manufacturing in this part of the world, and Tim and I were with a group a few weeks ago where, giving across the point of view is you're only as strong as your weakest link. And when Asia provides such a huge part of the production and manufacturing, integrated business planning, certainly needs to be something that you have to think about harder. And we've seen no better example of that than over the last 18 months.
Okay. That I think is when I saw is most of organization when I visit, they already have a ERP program, but for planning they still use some Excel sheet to apply. That what is a favorite question that why you use this Excel sheet, because you already ERP. They said that is not much flexible in the organization. But I don't think so. Right now, I think it's many organization look for a planning scheduling software to help in more real time, more efficient. I heard from Tim. Tim, what is a maturity perspective for a supply chain? Can you explain more detail about that?
Yeah, again, if it's okay, I might share another slide. I find this very helpful.
Okay, please share yourself.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just presenting the wrong slide. There we go.
Right.
We find it's quite useful to consider organizational supply chain maturity at 4 levels. So a little simplistic, but it's quite useful way of thinking about it. Some businesses grow very quickly and very aggressively by looking for how they can grow their revenue. And businesses that do that, and they don't, if they don't also respect or don't build up their operational capabilities, they, from a supply chain extent, if they get a new big customer, they tend to put an expediter on it, and they just say, you know, Andrew, you go and look after these customers, make sure their materials ordered, make sure that we're responding to them very well. They're really, just from an organizational point of view, just looking for the next big sale. They're not so much worried about servicing their customers with improving their supply chain. And from a supply chain perspective, we see that they are firefighting, they're focusing on now, and they're really just focusing on getting the more work in, not how they're going to service the work. What's interesting about these organizations is that they don't know that there's a better way at an organizational level. Typically, I say this, if you've got the people running the business are very strong entrepreneurs or very, very strong sales and marketing, and don't have a strong supply chain team around them. So they're always just getting more revenue, but not servicing it. And yeah, like, it's really interesting. They don't know that there's a lot of benefit in improving their supply chain. So in the next level of organizations, and many businesses here, they think that, oh, we bought SAP, so we must be good, right? But from a supply chain point of view, we call them reacting. They would have a schedule and they have orders, but they don't necessarily have a forecast to show them what's going to happen outside the order horizon. And they're not operating with foresight. They're just looking at what's in front of them. So they're looking at what's next. Now, they're not out of control. They'll have a schedule for what trucks are going to go leave the warehouse today, which customers are going to be serviced, and what goes next on the machine. But they're not looking beyond that initial order horizon. And for these people and these businesses, we call them in reacting.
Right.
But yeah,
I think really, most of organization is maybe stage 1 or stage 2 only.
Yeah. It's amazing. Even some very, very well-known companies.
Right. I try to imagine. Tim, sorry. I try to imagine like Previous work I do like planning, scheduling also. Like hamburger, I'm in the middle, so sometimes sell fast, sometimes operation fast. I cannot manage what they want.
Yeah, yeah, very, very difficult. You're just running from one fire to the next.
Right.
Then for many businesses, this has been, they've figured that this is where they're aiming for. It's been good enough to be at planning. And
Mm,
the planning is an interesting issue for, like I said, for many businesses, this has been good enough for a long time. Typically, planning level of maturity, you have your orders, and then you have a forecast beyond the orders.
right.
We focus not just on the current order book, but also on the current period, which might be 2 or 3 months for some businesses.
Mm,
And we're planning to serve our customers. And that's a really exciting notion, particularly if you've been, like you said, if you've been in that situation where you don't know if you're running from one fire to the next. So starting to think about how I can make sure I can serve my customers and exhale a little bit, because I've got enough stock in the right places to help those. And that's been good enough. But what's starting to become really, really obvious is if you plan to serve your customers, but you don't know the cost to serve, it is like saying, I'm going to serve my customers at any cost. And most businesses are not in that business. There's not enough margin for you to say, I'm going to serve my customers at any cost. I can't give them a cup of coffee. It would cost me $10 to give them the cup of coffee that they want, and they're only paying $5, I will go out of business. We must see the cost to serve. And what that's given rise to is this movement of starting to see the cost to serve while we plan. And it's a very exciting realm where we call it optimize. Sometimes we call it dominate, because you actually get so powerful insights into the market while you're planning. You can seriously start to dominate your market. Well, what happens here is once your planners and everyone in your supply chain sees things like, if I do this job now, it's going to cost me another $3,000 to do that changeover, and 2 other jobs are going to be late. Or if while I'm planning, I see, oh wow, if I do this, I'm going to save $3 a pallet on my distribution costs. When you see the costs while you're serving your customers, it drives this. It becomes incumbent upon everyone in the supply chain. You start working towards improving and reducing those costs. And there's an amazing transformation that happens in the organisation when different parts of the organisation start becoming aware of the impact they have on the overall cost and capability of serving your customers. And that journey is a really, really fascinating one. And there's not many businesses have even tried to get up here. But yeah, it's a really interesting journey. So that's a way that we like to talk to our customers and people that we work with about the journey. And life is never this simple. You have people getting up here and then problems occur and ship doesn't show up with their materials, or a customer returns material because of a quality issue, and they'll come back down and they'll fall out of their planning or optimized phase. But with good systems and good skills, they'll quickly get back up here. But it's never static, but it's a nice way of thinking about the journey through supply chain maturity.
Okay. Tim is how fast? Can you show slide again, please?
Yeah. Sorry.
Right. How fast that is organization try to manage from reacting stage to optimize stage?
Look, that is a great question, and we talked before about the ERP foundation. If you've already got an ERP in place, this journey is probably years less. If you don't have an ERP and you're trying to do this journey, then you have to learn a whole lot of other skills as well. And I'd say you're probably putting another 2 years on your journey if you're trying to get off Excel and go up to planned and optimized. It would be uncommon for a business to be able to get from reacting up to this area within a year. That's probably about the fastest that we get people up there. We've had 6 to 9 months. And it really depends on how much time they spend down here and how many business processes we have to fix. But realistically, most businesses, if they're serious about it, can get from a reacting phase up to a planning, starting to behave in optimized place in 2 years is very achievable if they're serious about
it. Right.
And 1 year is possible. Less than that's hard.
Andrew, may I ask some question, because it's from reacting stage to planning or optimize. Most of organization each month they have a sale and operation planning meeting. What I saw and observed, most of them try to talk together, meeting together, 3 hours without consensus or final decision making. That is many issue in organization. So when they have is a good planning, what is look like as is a maturity model from a team perspective.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Considerporn, because what's really critical here is from an internal point of view, you've really got to make some changes, as Tim alluded to, as you go through this process. There's a change in KPIs of people's KPIs. No longer is a certain piece just the domain of one part of the business. Tim sort of used a great sort of sentence earlier, which was, kind of at what cost do we do this? And you can sit in an S&OP meeting, and if you're really not being truthful with each other about what your goals are, then it's a pointless meeting, and it's doomed to failure, right? So I think, as Tim sort of said, you can move very quickly in this area, but what you do have to think about is what needs to change within the business. So it might not just be processes, it's got to be KPIs. The other thing that people really forget about in this area is skill set. People aren't always built to do this well or at all. There's a very big difference operating collaboratively and operating in silos. And if your business has really been operating in silos for a long time, you may not have the right people to be collaborative. So you've really got to think about upskilling or change of skills. In some cases, it's even a change of personnel. You can't afford for these sorts of programs to go wrong because you don't have the right people's buy-in. So stakeholders are really important. And I think, it's that end goal, because you talk to different pieces of a business, and customer satisfaction or on shelf, right product, right place, right time isn't always necessarily everyone's goal within the business, because they haven't been given that final vision. And from that point of view, you've got to be very careful. But I do agree with Tim. You can move very fast through this process, but you've got to plan it very well. And you need to be very consistent about the messaging that you're giving within the business and what people's roles are in order to go from the different levels as you progress.
Right.
Great observation, Andrew. One of the most mobilizing components of that kind of transformation too, from what I've seen in our experience, is if you know what to pick up on Andrew's point, if you know what you're chasing, and if that's a monetized amount, let's say one of our clients recently, we helped them save $25 million of inventory. If you know, and everyone in the business knows, we're doing this because we're trying to reduce our inventory by $25 million, it is very, very hard not to get excited about being part of that. However, if you say, we're going to do this project because it's a good idea, and Andrew, you should change the way that you're going to work, and Citypoint, you're going to change the way that you're going to work, that's ego, right? It's hard, and it's very confronting. But if there's a bigger why you should make this change, it becomes incumbent upon you to get on board, or there's a good reason to let go of what you know in the past and what you've done in the past. And we find that really and oftenly a missed out component in these journeys. So if you can, do an opportunity assessment, understand where the big prizes are, and tie your business milestones and your transformation milestones to some of these wins, because it gives people a good reason not to do what they did yesterday.
Okay, right. In my experience, Tim, is for Industry 4.0 and digital transformation. In Thailand, we try to implement vertical integration. It means we can try to integrate from machine to ERP, from shop floor to top floor. It means right now some organization they can have is a real-time monitoring and dashboard. Know exactly what their production line run their product is or downtime or something happen. In terms of as a horizontal integration or supply chain, right now I saw many software can help in terms of real time. What is a best practice for process of IBP program right now?
That's a really good question and a very big question. While we want to get IBPs and any business process best with the best data you can get at the time, it's very easy to get distracted with too many projects. And integrating or digitizing all data or real timing all data is a dangerous kind of agenda on its own right. For me, I'm about we know this is foundational. We know this is building a better future. But what we want to do is pick projects within the spectrum of all of the real-time data or Industry 4.0 activities we could choose from. Pick the ones that are going to leave immediate value. Again, we can get momentum behind it. We want to be able to implement them quickly so that the business can unequivocally understand the value of having real-time data. But I'd always do this in small projects because a project for interoperability, I was having a discussion with Lockheed Martin over in the States about interoperability and getting all of their systems feeding in so they could do this. And I could see immediately what the problem was. They were on a journey that was going to take 5 to 10 years. And it's too big, it's too bold, it's too touchy. Yeah. How can you get excited? And the first time there's a problem, the board will pull their hair out and say, why are we doing this? But if you have little projects that deliver big value, then it just becomes a way of doing things. And you can do your 5-year plan. If you've got short, sharp, if the early projects deliver big value, then it's no problem anymore. And for me to come back to your specific question, IBP, we need better data. We don't want to spend time collating and formatting data because what we want to be doing is having all of the business leaders inside the business getting consensus about what our next choices are. And you don't do that by trying to interpret the latest PowerPoint. You don't do that by spending your time trying to make graphs look pretty. You want everyone to already have understood the data so that they can look at the data and actually and extract the information and knowledge that's in that data and then apply their experience on top of it so we can have meaningful conversations. So one thing we do see is that really effective IBP processes, we're not having those questions about data. We know the timeliness, we know the accuracy of it, and we're already beyond that. Now, what your individual organisation will need, I can't answer that without diagnosing, but I'd caution businesses about trying to get all data real time. But similarly, we cannot afford to spend our time worrying about the quality of data. So we want to pick, while we're tidying up our housekeeping and always improving the quality of data and timeliness, to put that on the board's radar. We want to make sure we've got some projects that deliver big value, and then and then that becomes a way of doing business, and you'll continue to improve your data streams without needing to wait for it. Because if you've got to wait, like Lockheed Martin, wait 5 years before everything's perfect, that's like, wow, you'll miss the game. They've got enough margins, they can worry about that. But for most businesses, that's not an option.
Right. Tim, you have is a 3S model. Can you show on 3S model? Because I think that is a good model on that. During this, may I ask Andrew for organization, because most of organization, they think when they have a good software, they should have is a good result. I don't think so, because most of organization they try when they implement the software, they think that is finished. Anyway, we have is a organization or people skill. When you saw a client in around Asia, what the skill need to improve, Andrew, in terms of IBP process?
So let me just go back and answer one of the other questions as well. As it does come down to people. So it's a good question, Considerpon, because at the end of the day, systems are only as good as the people that operate them. And you do get a lot of fatigue. So they call it transformation fatigue these days. And as Tim sort of said, sometimes it's about digestible chunks. I often say to clients, how do you eat an elephant? And it's only one bite at a time. So,
Mm.
you can't bite off more than you can chew. In terms of skills, I think it's a really interesting area. I had a conversation with a long-term colleague a few weeks ago who was talking about the fact that companies are now have reverse mentoring in their businesses, because the skills that are coming in are not the crusty old grey-haired like me and Tim sort of era, that the grumpy old man on the shop floor. It's very much down to new and defined skills. Now, Tim's an exception to the rule. He's kind of down with the hip kids on what's the latest. But to me, it's a little bit about that reverse mentoring, which I thought was really interesting, because these kids come in and they are full of really good ideas, and they're full of the latest sort of capability sets of ML, AI, all sorts of these really interesting and good things, but they don't have the business experience. So that reverse mentoring of trying to get someone who knows all about the business to understand what these new skill sets will bring to the business, I think is exceptionally interesting. And in that sort of case, I think what we're going to find is, people who can insert themselves with those skill sets quickly and effectively into a business are going to be highly invaluable. They're going to be the people that give us to Tim's point earlier, it's no longer about, here is the linear line that we need to work towards. Let's pause here and ask a what if scenario. And if we can't answer the what if scenario, then it doesn't matter what data we have, because we're still not sure about what we should do. So, that skill set is also really, really important as we go through. It's no longer about being, I used the word earlier, but it's no longer about being mile deep in your capability set. You've got to, mile deep and inch wide. You've got to broaden that. You've got to be looking left and looking right. And I think they're some of the big skill sets that people are going to need to bring to bear as we move through, and also to be able to digest this quickly in order to try and prevent some of that transformation fatigue that a lot of people are seeing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
If I can add on to that, Andrew, really great observations. I think I like thinking about this diagram, and exactly for the reasons you're talking about, to avoid that transformation fatigue and to avoid the pitfalls that stop or kind of suck the energy out of the potential of transformational programs. There's some real, even though it's a very simple diagram, there's some really interesting perspectives on this. And we know that if we don't get the balance right of structure, systems and skills, then we just won't stay in this sweet spot of the really high impact, incredibly profound and noteworthy change programs that are self-funding and keep the organization kind of really motivated. And Andrew has already mentioned a number of them. He was talking about KPIs earlier, that you need to change your KPIs. We put that under structure. Not only structure, the first point is you've got to have the right people in the right places. And if you don't have single point accountability, for example, for reducing changeovers or for increasing delivery performance or for reducing the cost of imports or whatever the metrics are, if you don't have a single point accountability, then the organization is not going to really fire there. You're going to be missing some of the traction that you need. But if you've got the right structure and you've got people with the right skills, you're going to make, whatever they decide to do, they're going to be able to really move quickly. But if you've got a bad system, or if you're finding a system because it's just so heavy and hard work and people spend the whole time in Excel, it's kind of like you're enslaved. It's even worse if you've got skills and you've got the structure and people are accountable, but they're fighting the system to do what they need to do. You'll see these people still at work at 10 o'clock at night and working on weekends trying to get to what they need to because their systems aren't helping them.
Either that, Tim, just to interrupt quickly, either that or they go outside the system and start circumventing it, right? And that is the other really important point here is, the implementation needs to be done with people, not to them. So if they're not brought along for the journey, people will always find a way around it. They'll slip back into old habits or whatever. So you're absolutely right, Tim. That's really key as you move through. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I love it. And if you don't have the right structure, you're going to end up with poor aim. You just, you're going to flop around if your management isn't coming with you, if they're not helping you, if the system's telling you, order more stock, and your skills are telling you, yeah, that's the right thing to do, and that's the way we should be solving this problem. But your management team is saying, no, we're being measured on reducing that. You're going to be all over the shop because your management team's going to be trying to steer you away from what the systems are telling you, skills are telling you. If you don't have the skills, but the systems are telling you to behave in a certain way, and your boss is telling you, but you don't know how to do it, you're going to be more than a little bit frustrated. So some really interesting telltale signs of when these things don't align. You can look for it while you're in an organization. A bit like when a skilled person walks through a warehouse and you see dust on stock. And when you hear somebody say, yeah, we've got 7 days stock coverage, you look around and say, yeah, it's probably not the right 7 days though, is it? Because otherwise there wouldn't be dust on the stock. There's keys and clues that you see when you're navigating with organizations. There's tells everywhere for this stuff, and it can be really useful to have these simple kind of concepts in mind that we must bring the people along. We've got to have the organizational structure has to move as our goals change or as our maturity changes, and the system has to move with us too. You can't have a system acting like a sea anchor, slowing you down. If you're changing and you're moving and you're improving and evolving, why is it that it's nearly impossible to get your SAP system to change the way it's behaving? It's not a SAP. I'm not beating up on SAP here. It's just like your ERP systems can be really, really heavily owned through the organization, and trying to change something can just become this real problem while you evolve. And during a transformation program, we've got to accept that we're all going to change. If we do what we did, we get what we got. That's not why we do a change. We're doing a change so that we get different outcomes, and that requires different behaviors. And often we forget this stuff.
Okay. In Thailand, we most of that I think is a very important thing for leader to drive change, because it's you can imagine for IBP process, not owned by planning, not owned by sales side, not owned by production. So I think it's a very important thing who is a leader to implement and to cooperate together for each organization. What you suggest, because when you start to implement software in the organization, who should lead the program, or who you should work with to lead the project?
That's a great question. Andrew, do you want to have a crack at this one first?
I was going to say that's a really loaded question, Kunsitaporn. It's interesting because look, I think sales will always put their hand up to tell you that they lead the business because they make the money. I think, and sometimes that could be the right answer. Tim's example before of, yeah, we have 7 days of inventory, but you go down an aisle and there's dust on top. And that's because sales will tell you they have to have that product because this is the most important customer's one. But production will tell you you can only do one production run a year because it isn't selling enough. So at what margin do you need to sell that? And I think this is where, in my experience, you need to find the most neutral party in all of this, but the one that generally drives the business. And I can't believe that I'm actually going to sort of advocate this, but it generally best outcomes come when finance drive a lot of this, purely because they are the ones that end up seeing and are accountable for the top and bottom line at the end of the day. So it doesn't mean that they have to be the ones re-engineering the processes. It doesn't mean that they have to be the ones that are actually making policy. But generally, where they come from is the best interest of the business. And they generally get to challenge everybody in one way or another, right? So whether it be from challenging a sales and account perspective and saying, is this really an account that we want to keep? Or is this a line that we really want to keep? I think that kind of drives a good sensibility. what you're really looking for is neutrality in a lot of this, though. So, that everyone has too much skin in the game.
Right.
But again, it comes back to, look, the logistics guys, or the warehousing guys, here's what you're just going to have to live with going forward, and we're not going to beat you over the head that we've had to go and get extra warehousing because we're going to make to order, or make to stock rather than make to order, because sometimes that's the answer. So I don't think there's one good answer in there, Kunsitapon. I think it's also very dependent on the price and what they want to do. But I do feel that finance kind of has the ability to look at this with less emotion and more of whatever the board is trying to drive. So if the board and the C-suite are driving towards 100% customer satisfaction, then that may mean carrying extra stock, or it may mean getting rid of it could be a cull of SKUs. But they tend to execute according to the board priority. So I'm not quite sure whether that answers your question or not. And I know I've made a lot of my supply chain friends very unhappy, but that's kind of where I see the best mix coming from.
Okay, right.
I have to
answer.
Yeah, I have to agree in the respect, and it flows on from that earlier point I made, that the most profound and the least challenging transformationally projects that we do are when we already know what the size of the prize is. And to pick up on Andrew's point, I absolutely agree with him that the CFO is always at a level where they're not already embedded in a silo. So they're looking for opportunities across silos so they can adjudicate, as Andrew says. They're going to get past we know everyone in supply just blames forecast accuracy and that's sales problems and blah, blah, blah. What the CFO is more interested in is what's the bang for the buck? What seriously can we achieve in what time, and what are the other alternatives, regardless of where it sits in the organisation? How are we going to make a sensible decision here? But I think no CFO is going to get very excited if they're going to do a whole lot of extra work and steer a project unless there's a big dollar sign at the end of it. And they'll be more than happy then to take that to the board and make sure that the C-suite is behind it. So I absolutely agree with that. What I would say is that they're not the right people. They're the steering stakeholders. They're not stakeholders or steerers. They're definitely not the technical part. I know Andrew was making that point as well. But yeah, we shouldn't think about those people as being tightly in the weekly progress meetings or the daily scrum meetings, but they're very, very much need to be on that steering team that says, if we're not getting traction right, what other resources do we need, or what tap we're going to turn on to make this flow. So yeah, that fundamentally have somebody there with that level of seniority and investment to make sure that good ideas don't just stay unharnessed and misdirections need to be pulled up so we can get back on and keep moving.
Okay, because it's most of organization, they have receipt of change. So something change in the process, they not need to change at all. And also, you can imagine for KPI of each department, they already have all the KPI. It's similar like silo. So when we have for IBP process, they should have a common KPI to have align in the organization to ensure that is a good answer for customer, and profit and loss is a improvement. So what do you think is when we look at your maturity model, what benefit that they should get from that KPI? For example, they should have is more customer satisfaction, more sales accurate. What should look like when they have is a process improvement benefit in their organization?
Yeah, for me, I think there's a danger when we say when we leave it at a transactional level. If we say the customer satisfaction is going to go up from 90 to 95%, that's not as potent as saying our recurring revenue is going to go up from $10 million to $11 million, right? Because there's no value associated with that default. It may be an industry expectation, but it's a hygiene factor. It's hard to get excited about. Similarly, to say my forecast accuracy is going to go up from 50% to 60%. I pull my hair out the number of organizations we help improve their forecast accuracy, and they don't get that. The next step is we must put that into our inventory models and recalculate our safety stock, and then run with less stock because we can. They're like, oh, no, I just want the forecast accuracy up. Why? What have you done all that work for? How did that help? We want to, when you do see $20 million reduction in inventory or $9 million less raw materials, the impact on the business is staggering. And it often, you don't even need to improve the forecast accuracy. You just need to communicate the forecast accuracy through your supply chain. So we know this stock is always, it sells 23,000 units a month, plus or minus 1,000 units. I can order that all day long. I'm going to be fine. This one has to follow the forecast. If we communicate that and how volatile each of those streams are, we can make supply chain decisions profoundly, and we haven't improved the forecast accuracy. We've just communicated it. It is staggering how we miss that because we're in our silos and we get carried away with metrics that don't matter. We have a program called Metrics That Matter. When you put the metrics in that everyone can tie back to the success of the company, that's inspiring. If you know that you got up this morning and you did a changeover and it took half the time, and that's say $4,000 because you got the changeover really done well, that's inspiring, right? Because you now know what the physical impact was, and that's a pretty good day's work. So it's being able to annualize and dollarize is a common way that we use. It's not the only way, but it's really, really important to have these metrics and these programs and targets that are understandable to everyone in the business. And for me, that the easiest one of those is that annualized savings or annualized increase in revenue. They are profound and they will muscle everyone. A lot of the other targets. And
Right.
Inventory reductions, lead time reductions, so faster to market, changeover reductions or cost of goods sold reductions, and cost to serve reductions. They're 4 pillars that I like to say. There's a lot underneath those, about time of changeover or average run length and all sorts of other things that go into making that up. But because they're dollarized, those 4, they are pivotal and they're really easy to measure. And they are profound to the business, and everyone in the business will understand why it's important. So sorry to rant, but that's my 2 cents worth. They're the ones that you want to be looking for.
Okay, Tim, may I from sales side? What is a favorite answer for you? Most of customer is situation not the same. So I just sell. So I just receive some assumption from the customer. Then I put in my number, depend on customer. So I cannot improve my sale accurate because it's customer not accurate. So what you suggest and what the software can help more forecast accuracy in this?
I love your question, Sitapon. There's a program we use, great program, Business Review and Development. Well, there's a transition that goes on in sales where you go from being an order taker and believing what the customer says to, as we get better access to information. So this customer, last month they forecast 2,000 units, but they took 3,000 units. And the month before they forecast 2,000, 3,000. If I see a forecast for 2,000, I could just accept it. Or what would be better from an IBP or demand review point of view is saying, firstly, I am going to put my own business estimate in and I'm going to increase the sales because that's what I've seen. And I'm going to have a conversation with my customer and ask them what's happening. And are they aware that they keep, taking more than their forecast? So we actually want to, if you're business to business and your customers, at Coca-Cola or something like that, you want to go and have a conversation with them to ask why their forecasts are different from their actuals and try and gain a level of intimacy. You won't always get the customer to give you better forecasts, but you may pick up really important things and you may remind the customer's purchaser and the person that you're dealing with to find more out about what's happening in their organization. It can be really, really potent, and you become a pivotal part of their organization. And that's part of the end-to-end that we talk about in IBP, is looking beyond our own borders. We want to establish a relationship with our customers, and it starts by sharing with them your own observations and what you know and learning their account better. And effectively, you get to a point where you know it better than they do. And you can pick up order anomalies and forecast anomalies. And if you see something like, wow, you're not ordering that anymore, you may get the answer, yeah, we've decided to import that. You now immediately on the front foot, you can start, before you've lost the work, you can actually start renegotiating or try and pick up more work if they're doing well in other areas. So this kind of intimacy and conversations are really important. Our tools are designed to be very graphical and show you immediately, wow, there's something going on here. We want to inspire those conversations and we facilitate that. From the salesperson's perspective that you were talking about, the journey that we would take them on is explaining, put in the customers, we keep the customers' forecast. We're going to take a snapshot. That's what they said. When we're reporting back to them their forecast accuracy, that's what we'll do. But when we're using for our own supply chain planning, if we know that we can use statistics that are better, if we know that our sales guys know the forecast better, they can override those forecasts and replace them or augment them with their own understanding. And we will use that for supply after a consensus review. We'll use that and the completed picture. We take what the customers say, we consider it, but we don't rely on it. And some customers give you nothing, or they give you 3 months of good forecast and nothing, and we need longer. So we bring all this together in a consensus picture and we review it frequently. And we're reviewing it, trying to get these little nuggets of market intelligence, like when the customer tells us, wow, we just bought this whole other business, we've got a whole lot more work coming. We want to know that, or if they're phasing out one product and moving to another, we want to know that, not fill our warehouse with last year's product. So we want this intimacy and we don't rely on it, but we want to bring that in and try and get as much insight into our customers as we can without over-relying on them being accurate. So there's a very tight, we call it a consensus demand review process. It's very powerful and it's interesting that it's light. It's actually a really easy way to forecast and a very light way to start to understand the dynamics in your business by understanding the dynamics in your customer's business.
Okay. Good, Andrew. What do you think is can improve for forecast accuracy? Because most of organizations, they said it's depend on customer, but it's when we have the software can help, we can project, and also we can learn from customer data from lead customer. What do you think is a forecast accuracy can happen when we have a software solution implement?
Yeah, so I funnily enough, I agree with Tim. That a lot of this is really about using that data to go back and have sensible conversations.
Right.
And making sure that, and again, it's potentially a new skill. If you think about what salespeople are incentivized by, it's in the title. It's sales. So volume is everything, and channel stuffing and placement of over orders to meet targets in order to get bonuses. All of these things. So some of it's about actually behavioral change as well.
Right.
But a big part of this is taking that data back to your customer and saying to them, you consistently do this and we consistently have to do this. And if you can go back and say, if we change this behavior, we might be able to get you a better price. We might be able to negotiate a better way of doing this. Because again, to Tim's point, a little bit of this is customer intimacy. You've got to understand what motivates them to under order but over demand. So it could be a warehousing issue that they're trying to look after, the fact that they can't hold as much stock. So therefore, what they're looking for is not necessarily to manipulate the numbers. They know what the numbers are going to be. They're manipulating them to try and fit a problem that they have. And if you know their problem, you can work with them. And your data is just as important to take to them as well. A lot of people are afraid to share data. And I think that's just simply not the way to get better forecasting done. Better forecasting is done when more sharing is done, and more openness in the discussion. Because as soon as that starts, you can start to offer some interesting things to your customers. Better bundles, different bundling, bigger shipments, but in a different alternative way. So,
warehousing, all that sort of stuff.
Exactly. So, it could be more frequent trucks, just less, just smaller loads. And that means being able to work back through your system and their system and figure that out. So it's again not one thing answers all the questions, but I definitely see that data and the sharing and the openness being critical.
Okay. It means data from the system very is important to know what it look like from historical data,
Yep.
uh, projection data, and also we can have is a forecast model in terms of statistics to ensure the assumption from sale or demand side that is more accurate or not, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One
Sorry,
of
Tim.
the one of the surprising things that people learn once they start forecasting, I think many salespeople and even many executives have an expectation that every SKU, every period should be forecast, out for the next 24 months. And
Right.
that can be crushing for every customer. If you've got 100 customers and 100 products, well, there's 10,000 entries. You've got to forecast 24 periods. It's staggering. And that's how people start when they start forecasting in Excel. And the real key to improving forecast accuracy is presenting the data that you have well. So summarize it well so you can see outliers quickly. Presenting it so it's immediately obvious if this customer's forecasts, perhaps at a higher level, just their total spend, is that up or down on last month or last year, and just look for those patterns that make it really easy for anyone in the supply chain to understand and challenge. It's, for me, we know when we've got it right, working with a customer, when I can walk into a demand review and without having spent a minute with them, know whether which channels need challenging, which channels look like they're stable and predictable, and which ones are suffering. And if I can do it, the senior managers can do it, and then you get the other parts of the business find it easy to get included. No one wants to be included in looking through thousands of SKUs, thousands of time periods. That's just hurts everyone's head and it's just scary. But once you present the data well and you can easily interpret the story with just a few minutes of working with the owners of the data, that's when you've got it right. And for me, it's, one of the dangers of talking about Industry 4.0, and we talk to Planning 4.0, where Industry 4.0 enables us to go, is although there's a lot of technology and a lot of foundational stuff that goes in, from the end user point of view, everything we're doing is about augmenting your decision making. And it's one of the things I'd really urge any senior managers to consider, is that the journey of digital improvement is not about spending more time inside data. It's about making your decisions easy to make, because the data is, you're dealing with less. There's a lot of data under the bonnet, like going through the stream, but you're just looking at the bits that you need, and your attention is drawn to where your expertise is needed. And that's the really exciting part about the digital transformation. It's not being drowning in data. It's about when you need it, having what you need there to make the right decisions. And forecasting is a really good example of that. Forecasting isn't the way you've had to do it in Excel. It should be, by exception, it should stand out that anyone that has just a few minutes of working with it can ask the questions, wow, why is that so different from last year? It wasn't different last month. Is that right? Is that wrong? There must be a story behind it. What is the story? And when your business is that transparent, you've won. You already, because you can draw other people's experience in and they can contribute. And it's a really exciting transformation.
Right. So I think it's a maturity model. It's every organization expect to optimize level stage. So when we look back on benefit or KPI, they should look on how is forecast accuracy improvement. Maybe it's 10%, 20% something. And also what I thinking is high performance on is on time delivery, because it's on time delivery is for customer satisfaction or customer experience that will help for revenue growth in the company.
Yep.
That is when we look at the customer side, and when we look back in internal process, they should have like their inventory level is reduced. It means they more lean, right? What I thinking, and also in terms of operation or production, they would have machine utilization, or they can have more asset utilization. I think this is can improve in terms of organization is better. So I think it's when we need to start, what we should start from implement software, or we should do assets management in organization first to ensure what are major problem or priority to implement the IBP process. What you suggest they should start in software first or assess by yourself in the organization first team?
Look, it's a great question, and actually there's one other thing that's often thrown up, and that is process first. And I say I'll answer the process first because it's really important to understand what your process is, but it's simplistic to believe that your process can be optimized or improved without the systems being malleable. There's no quicker way to kill a program than, for example, if you say, okay, Siddharpan, we need to start a forecasting program. Now just go out and forecast 10,000 SKU customer combinations in Excel. It's the systems aren't supporting it, so you're not going to get very far.
Right.
So when you think of process, we should know what the process should be, but then the systems should go with it. Otherwise, you get a process that your systems don't support. But I think a better thing to do than either a process or system is diagnose first, because unless you've got a big shiny gold bar that you can put on the table shortly, say 6 months or 12 months after you started the project, that everyone can look and stand around and say, we got that gold bar, now what's next? That's how you keep the momentum. If not, if you don't have the gold bar, and again, I think forecast accuracy is too far away from being important to people. It can be incredibly important. It can drive much better behavior, delivery, and so on. But I think that what it most delivers is an awareness of how to shape our supply chain to respond while we improve forecast accuracy. But for me, you decide, is it we're going to use forecast accuracy to improve our customer service and grow our revenue? Are we going to use our forecast accuracy so we can right size our inventory and save, $50 million of inventory, or maybe $1 million of obsolete stock, that slog that gets discarded because we didn't have the right stuff and it got spoiled, or whatever? We want to measure those opportunities and make sure there's something that by putting in the processes like a jigsaw puzzle, the pieces that we want to go to and get to our final IBP end state, we're fully integrated and we're fully Industry 4.0 adoptive. We want to pick the pieces that will give us quick value so that the organization will remain supporting us. And that's why, to me, it's so important that we do the diagnostic first. We understand all the opportunities, which ones can we get quickly, because unless you keep the CFO excited and the CEO asking what's next and the board saying, how is this going, unless they're behind it, they won't keep supporting us in a year's time or 2 years' time.
Okay, right. And how about you, Andrew, in terms of a consultant perspective, what you suggest for the organization, what they should do at the beginning phase?
So, look, I think it comes down to 3 words and how you then drive that backward. So to me, it's about measurable, profitable growth. So I don't know any business in the world that would sit there and say, we don't want to grow. I don't know any business in the world that would say we don't want to be profitable. But I do think you've got to be able to measure how you get there and what you do. So to Tim's point, a lot of companies rush out and buy the latest shiny thing as a toy and don't really understand how to use it or what needs to be done with it. A lot of companies spend a lot of time looking at their processes, but they don't understand why they're looking at their processes to what end. So for me, it comes back to that measurable piece. So, if it's measurable, then it's doable, and then there is a milestone to be hit. And I think that, and if that coupled with the profit and the growth, that's where you start to make those changes that are really transformational for your business. So anyone can grow in a market. I can give away stuff and my market share grows, but my profit will not. So I've got to work out, are these customers the right customers? Am I charging them the right margin? and that always drives back into the business. So for me, those are the three things that you've got to try and an ethos to work by, which is that measurable, profitable growth. And if you're answering yes to all of those three, not questions, but if you say, I know what profit looks like and where it comes from, because
Right.
company profit doesn't necessarily mean that each piece of the business is going to be working to the same measures that it was before in order to get that overall profitable growth. So I think for me, it's understanding what you want to do with your transformation. I think you've got to have very clear goals for what you want to do, and that will drive you down the road of what then do you do with your processes, and what do you then do with the shiny trinket that you're going to buy in order to help you actually get there. And of course, the software is always going to be key to take out a lot of the human element of mistakes, repeatability, etc. So you've got to be very thoughtful about, does this fit my business? I remember an ex-colleague of mine many, many years ago describing an implementation, and he said, we have an atom bomb to crack a walnut. And it always resonates with me that you can over-engineer things really easily, but you can under-engineer them just as badly. So you've got to be realistic in what it is you're trying to do.
I heard a wonderful term just the other day where they were talking about getting the whelm just right. You don't want to be overwhelmed and you don't want to be underwhelmed. And I really like that.
Uh-huh. Okay. That's today's time run out now. I think it's for overview and benefit from IBP process. We just is more clear now. We will have is a IBP series continue 5 series. Next week we will talk about demand management. Okay, so that is how software can help in terms of demand planning management, and also how to start to implement or assess in your organization to start with this. We will continue for next Thursday for this next episode. For today, thank for everyone, and we will see next week. Bye now. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Siddharth. Thanks, Andrew.
Take care.